Hey educators, do you often feel a little bit overwhelmed with documentation, especially the requirement to create learning stories for 20 plus children who attend different days? When it's planning time, you are racing to capture those valuable moments and create the planning cycles for each child. According to a sequel, that's what we have to do. I totally understand your pain, as I have been in a position of an early childhood educator who was contributing to documentation. I was a room leader and a kindergarten teacher who was running the room and planning given the time that I was giving and trying to create meaningful documentation. Learning stories are promoted as one of the tools for documentation, and in some centers they're almost compulsory, which is not the case. A CEQA doesn't prescribe any type of observations. A CEQA tells us to capture each child's learning that should show their progress over time. So that's the most important thing. We need to focus on using assessment wisely. And I have a solution for you, which is learning notes. This video cast is about learning notes. So you will learn about this approach to writing documentations, writing good documentations in childcare, early childhood education and care. You also will learn how to apply this understanding of these 3 steps from learning notes to your practice. So I hope this workshop will enhance your skills as an educator, and if you're an early childhood student, you definitely will learn one of the most effective observation tools to use in the future. Let's get started, shall we? All right, so learning notes. Learning notes were developed by Ken Blaiklock. So that's a researcher from New Zealand. So it's an educational researcher who discussed this tool and presented a few presentations. He wrote a couple of articles on learning notes, comparing them to learning stories, another approach that was developed by Margaret Carr and Wendy Lee. So he suggested, Ken Blaiklock, this tool as straightforward practical method for recording, assessing children's essential learning experiences. So this method is introduced, as I said, as an alternative to learning stories or other narratives. It might still have elements of narrative or storytelling, but it is short, it is quick, and it is effective. He says that unlike learning stories, learning notes are easier to produce, and that's why educators can do it more frequently, allowing for a broader range of assessments across important learning areas and domains for each child. Blaiklock, 2010. So I will in this video explore the shift from learning stories and long convoluted narratives to learning notes and explain how this new approach can benefit educators, children, families, and early childhood students who are pre-service teachers. So what are learning stories to start with? I love learning stories. As you know, I have read the books on learning stories since I started my Bachelor of Early Childhood Education and Care in 2010. I absolutely love social cultural approach to observations. Learning stories are used in New Zealand, so they are originated from New Zealand, and I actually attended Wendy Lee webinar. I've read Margaret Carr book and I've read Wendy Lee book as well. So both the old and updated version, as I call them, the black and green one. Learning Stories in Practice is still my table book. I love reading it. It really enhances my understanding of what to capture, how to capture it in a more attractive way. But I also understand that learning stories, while they are detailed narratives, they document child's experiences and follow strengths-based approach, are often not accessible to any beginning educators. Why? Because now we have shortages of staff in early childhood education. We simply do not have time to record such long, convoluted narratives. We also don't have time to record observations of each child, so you need to consider maybe group observations, which I also can introduce you in my next video. But learning stories are nevertheless amazing because they are engaging, so they are interesting to read. They include child's voice, they include family perspective, they actually can be exchanged between families and educators, and they can be shared widely on the walls, in the portfolios, on Story Park and other apps. So they look quite engaging, professional. They focus on child's dispositions, such as taking an interest, showing curiosity, sense of being, persistence, problem solving, and other strengths from Tertiary, which is New Zealand curriculum, similar to EYLF. Dispositions of learning. In the EYLF, we also have dispositions of learning, and we can use them for writing learning stories as well. I have written example of learning story and analyzed it in this video, so watch it if you want to learn more about learning stories, how to write observations professionally using the EYLF. In this video, I have an example of written learning story that is celebrating child's advanced numeracy skills and interest in big numbers. So why I actually am making this video exploring this method that critique learning stories. So Ken Blaiklock articles that I've read and presentations that I watched are really spot on in terms of the drawbacks and some limitations of learning stories. Personally, as an early childhood teacher, professional, I also faced some of the challenges. Number one, it's quite long. So I remember when I just started to run my kindergarten room in 2013, that was one of my newest classes. Actually it was 2011 and 12. So I remember that I would take my lunch break. So I used to take my lunch break to write stories that happened during the day. They would be group learning stories. They would involve multiple children, but I still was trying to make it fun and engaging, focus on dispositions, include exact children words, and even transcribe some of our conversations. It was time-consuming, difficult to manage, and I remember my boss back was giving me feedback that my planning could improve and my observations could improve. I guess because the stories were a little bit long, messy, I didn't have a proficiency in writing as well. English is not my first language. So it took me ages to produce something, and it still was not showing the planning cycle. So after this critique, and also after struggling to find time to write observations, I started to make notes, and that's how I discovered jottings and eventually moved to snapshots. So honestly, now on reflection, I think my snapshots, which you can see here as an example for the child, I have very nice 3 pictures. They capture the learning that is happening. The child is holding scissors. Scissors is a complex skill. And you can see that child is capable of cutting along the lines. His face shows surprise. You can see that he's involved in activity. So I see dispositions, I see fine motor skills. And because I was there, I also just need to make notes to remember and unpack it a little bit further. So this could be an example of learning notes, although it doesn't have all 3 steps, which I will cover later. But snapshots are definitely great. So many of my students and colleague educators found learning stories time-consuming as myself. They found it difficult to manage, especially with 20+ students in the classroom. It's very hard to capture a child's learning over time. Learning story can be on anything. So in this case, for example, I could say that Blake is very capable scissors skills learner, or cut if I would like write a nice cut along the line, nice heading, but would it give me the assessment tool to be able to measure his perseverance, enthusiasm, and to compare his concentration and skills? So not really. So I need something that can be done over time. So that's why long learning story about scissors probably wouldn't be an optimal scenario in here. Hence, I think learning stories as a simple and more efficient way to document children learning can be great. They are somewhat more objective if you compare them to learning story, but learning story is subjective on purpose because it's social cultural approach, and they understand that everything we do is subjective, as teachers will look at learning what we see in here in this particular example according to our experience, knowledge of the EYLF, understanding of child's development, understanding of this child abilities. So it's always a little bit subjective. Now, learning stories are beautiful, but there are some drawbacks and limitations. Hence, learning notes. So learning notes we offer as an alternative to learning stories. Instead of writing long narratives, teachers and educators can use learning stories to record brief observations following the 3 parts. You can see 1, 2, 3. Very easy to follow. Number 1, describe. It's a short description of what child is doing. Number 2, interpret. A brief analysis of what the child's actions mean. What learning do you see? And number 3 is what's next. What's next could be suggestions for future activities, set up a new goal, or any other ways to support child to continue learning. A simple example of a learning note, very simple. It might be a description of child counting blocks, which could be interpreted as an important step in developing early math skills, for example, from 1 to 12. And at this age, it's advanced skill. So you also can suggest new counting games, for example, counting by 2s, or even learning a multiplication table through counting by 2s, by 3s, and playing games like domino and similar games that help with multiplication. Now let's talk about some key benefits of learning notes. So learning notes have, of course, some benefits, especially if we compare them over learning stories, but even over jottings. So learning notes allow for more frequent observations. In my practice, since I started learning notes, they are quicker to write. So I created more documentation. And this is more likely to be passed as part of the center assessment for quality area 1. It also gives me more accurate picture of child's progress. What I noticed when I wrote one learning story, let's say about us building nests with clay, I captured group learning, and some individual learning could unpack, let's say for one child, another child, but I couldn't see a lot of documentation, let's say on Claire. So I needed to make sure that I collect enough those learning moments, significant moments for each child. And once I switched to learning notes, I did. I had piles and piles and piles of little snapshots, which I called snapshots, learning notes on each child, including their samples, their words, how they tied the knot, how they were able to climb up the pole, how they have demonstrated sense of belonging, how they created friendship. So it made my life so easier, and actually made me very happy as a teacher, because I could see the learning is happening all the time through routines, through everything, and I was able to show it every single day. Educators and teachers find learning stories time consuming. That's why we are looking for new ways to record documentation. So we don't have to spend hours writing long convoluted narratives. We just need to focus on what's important, and this way we can interact more with children. We can focus more on managing behavior, setting expectations, role modeling, intentionally teaching. Learning notes have clear focus on learning. That's something that I really like about learning notes. And this focus is more objective than subjective storytelling. So it takes time to learn to actually write good narratives. While with learning notes, any of my students who are studying towards Certificate 3 can start now. Let's delve now to nitty-gritty details on learning notes and how to use them in practice. First step is describe. At this step, we are capturing the moment. As you can see here, I captured a moment of child writing with a texter. Yes, so you can see S 5 5. Yeah, we don't know if it's S turning into 5, so we need to make a note, right? So otherwise, what is that? Is it child practicing? Is it primary school age child? Is it 5 years old child? So at this step, describe, you are writing down exactly what the child is doing. So the description should be as specific and clear as possible. For example, Sam used the texter to practice writing S, the initial letter of her name or his name. She wrote clear 5S and they magically turned into digit 5. I am 5, said Sam. So you see here, I described what's happening. I can actually add where, indoor, free playtime in the literacy corner. That would be good to add. But you also can see the child's words, I am 5. Also, you can see some important information that Sam likes to write, and S is his initial letter of his name. This simple description is effective. It shows us emerging writing, understanding of concepts, numbers, and letters. I can then sit down and interpret it. At this stage, I need to capture the learning. I need to capture meaningful moments, moments of change, moments of achieving milestones, moments when child showed joy and emotions, self-regulation skills, attempted to resolve conflicts, build a tower, whatever you find meaningful. You can use short descriptions, almost like jottings, like 1 or 2 sentences, or you can write full 2-3 paragraphs here. The most important thing is to focus on essential. Record your notes on iPad, post-it notes, pocket notebook, or a reflection journal like I use. I use Bachelor reflection journals for easy captions. When I was working as a room leader, I was using just normal journal like this one. I like journals that have pages to draw mind maps, and I would use a planner as well to plan particular experiences that are linked to dates. This is a page from my journal. As you can see, when you write, record this information as soon as possible. Otherwise, you will forget the exact words of the child and the sequence. Always add photo if possible, but you don't have to. For example, here, children use chalk to draw outside. It doesn't really capture the learning, but I can add more information here to make it more aligned to learning notes. But you can see singing bowls meditation during group time. Introduce singing bowl to children. Ask them if they have ever seen the bowl. They said no. They took turns in practicing. Some children were holding it properly, some children were holding it like this. Some children could strike the ball really well. Some children find it quite difficult to turn the wrist. Simple experience of meditation shows a lot of developmental outcomes and also shows who is connected to music, who loves mindfulness, how does this routine works for us. Amazing, isn't it? Also, you can see that we had the experience in outside water play, exploring volume, colors with food dyes and a range of tools. I need to add a little bit more information here, but you can see, for example, Marcus used texter to draw a gummy bear when we played outside. So he liked the song Gummy Bear, and he then ended up drawing the gummy bear. According to him, that's what he looks like. And for me, this is an indicator of mark making, of stage of development of his drawing skills, ability to communicate ideas on paper through drawing, symbols, communication outcome 5. Lots of other things. So here we go. Next stage after you captured everything is interpretation. Here you need to analyze your learning. So you analyze your descriptions, everything that you captured. So in this interpret stage, you reflect on child's actions and their meaning. So what learning do you see? Can you see if it's easy for child? Can you see any milestones? Can you see dispositions, learning goals that you set up for this particular group or this particular child? Link it to EYLF, our early years learning framework, or Victorian framework if you're in Victoria. Link it to developmental milestones EYLF document, which could be updated soon. For my example with Sam writing, the teacher might interpret it as a sign of increased confidence in his or her emerging writing and motor skills. Sam has become more confident in holding a marker. She seems to demonstrate a stronger wrist control and dynamic tripod grip. Recognizing the first letter of her name is aligned with the expectations of this age group. This section is often called analysis of observations. Traditionally, here you may use some developmental milestones, domains of development, interpret learning holistically through the lens of your favorite theory. You can link to your analysis, interpret sections to music, sustainability, literacy, numeracy. You can also add links to domains of development such as physical development, communication, language, social, emotional, spiritual development, child's background, language, culture, interest. If child is from a cultural diverse background, you definitely need interaction with families sometimes to interpret the information here. Dispositions from the EYLF that are linked, they are described in the EYLF, specifically in outcome 4, may be useful for your analysis. Always link to EYLF principles, if applicable, big ideas, belonging, being, becoming, 5 learning outcomes, and sub-outcomes. So we covered 2 steps, describe, interpret. The third step of learning notes is what next. Ken Blaiklock describes it as optional step for planning future activities. So why optionals? Because we don't really have to give children extensions. We just need to use planning cycle. And if you remember, EYLF planning cycle talks about record, observe, analyze, implement, plan, implement, and reflect. So as long as you reflect on child's learning, you might not actually extend this experience because they might lose interest in trucks or dinosaurs. You might actually find the extension that is more focusing on skills rather than interest. So that's very important to note. What's next usually is about more challenging tasks. So when I look at Sam's writing, I can see that they are able to write S really well. Can they write all the other letters of their name, A and M? Can they copy simple sight words? Are they able to use different tools of writing? Can they type? You also can suggest Sam to create their own story, and you can scribe it, or they can try to write it down using your scaffolding. Sam is bilingual, so I offered her to describe the concept. So we were talking about one poem, Robin Bobin Barabek, which is a traditional Russian poem, which is based, I think, on an English poem and translated. And here is her representation of it. So you can see that Robin Bobin Barabek is drawing lots of people he's eaten. So it talks about a lot of things, that he has eaten 40 people and they are inside his mouth. This also is a concept of a fish that attaches itself to other fish such as sharks and whales, and we talked about it. And you can see that this child is able to write in words. Yeah, so that's really great capturing of learning, and as an assessment tool, you can see learning notes with samples can be quite powerful. Now, let's consider learning notes as a tool for assessment, for formative assessment on the go, and summative assessment when we do it at the end of certain period for the distance travel by the child for capturing learning. So let's say they spend a month in our center, 6 months, a year, and now we are writing a report, so summative report. So they could be really helpful for both summative and formative assessments. Formative assessments we usually are used to make immediate changes to our delivery, to our routines, to child's experiences, to support the child better, while summative assessment can help us to sum up learning and write a proper transition report, to reflect on child's learning, child as a learner, dispositions, some areas that are missing or gaps. Always use strengths-based language, but you can still identify the areas to improve or add on. Collecting multiple notes like those ones can track child progress across specific areas. In our case, language, writing, emerging literacy, numeracy, communication skills, right? And child's background language as a bilingual child. Learning notes provide more holistic view of child's development. So while jottings are great, for making notes, as you can see in my reflective diary, I have a lot of jottings. Learning notes are a little bit more detailed, and they do provide enough substance or meat, as I call it, for analysis and reflection. They provide us with enough information about child interest, growth, development, and creativity. So this aligns with the EYLF goals. One of the principles of the EYLF is holistic and integrated approaches. EYLF 2.0 highlights the importance of collecting information holistically about the child. So I'm going to use examples from Ken Blaiklock, and I added references at the end. So we are using proper APA referencing to the original source. Ken talks about in his presentation and articles about learning notes in this way. Sarah climbed up and went down the slide independently for the first time this morning. That's describe step. Juan counted to 12 this afternoon when arranging the pieces of the wooden car puzzle. There you go. Eloni and Ezra talked frequently with each other as they role-played cooking in the family area for about 15 minutes. They asked me to try their pizza and both told me they were friends. So that's description part. Here is an example of full learning note, so you can have a good idea of where to start. Kahu, age 4 years, 7 months. Tuesday, 16th of August, 11:30. Writing table. Stage 1, describe. Kahu sat at the art writing table for about 10 minutes. He worked independently, trying out different pens and colors. He nearly always used his left hand, often using the first grip to hold the pens. Fist grip. He then presented his work to me and said, "This is a letter for you. Read it." Interpret. Kahu appears to be showing a preference to use his left hand when writing, drawing, and he is trying out ways to hold the pen, so that's a fist grip. His letter showed a mixture of lines at different angles and repeated patterns. He repeatedly written K, the first letter of his name. He displays an understanding that writing involves repeating symbols and letters, and that it can be read by other people. Links to Tertiary, that's a New Zealand curriculum, communication goal 3, learning outcome, and understanding that symbols can be read by others. Fits with inventing writing phase described on page 14 of Clay's book, How Very Young Children Explore Writing. Excellent. So what's next? Tomorrow I will give Kahu an envelope. This idea with his name written on it, containing a letter from me to Kahu that thanks him for his letter. I will show Kahu some blank envelopes and paper and ask if he would like to write some more letters. This will provide me with opportunities to talk about what he would like to write and to provide guidance with writing the letters in his name using correct pencil grip. I will encourage him to use the triangular shaped pencils to assist with this. Lots of teaching, interpretation is really good. Lots of intentional teaching strategies for the future. What are the challenges? So all observational tools have advantages and disadvantages. Let's be honest, let's talk about disadvantages. Like with all observations, we need to stay objective as much as we can. We need to capture learning, not just a child's biography or what children are doing. Quite often we are describing what's happening in front of our eyes, but is it learning? Make sure it is learning. Do you understand what learning is? Capture meaningful moments. If you don't know what to write, watch my video on how to write meaningful observations and watch my other videos on how to write good observations. Teachers usually focus on recording what they see and hear, and quite often they mix interpretation and description. I was just marking one of my certificate 3 students, and she did exactly that. She put everything in mumble jumble of description and interpretation. I encourage all people who are studying towards their first qualification to separate these 3 steps. Number 1 is description, number 2 is interpretation or analysis, and number 3 is what's next, or suggestions for the next experiences, extensions as we used to call them. Separating these sections can help you to be more objective in your description and capture a little bit more important, meaningful learning. If you know what I mean. Otherwise, you will focus too much on interpreting without having enough input on what is actually happening. Yeah. So when you mature as a professional, please be my guest and use both in one section and call it learning notes, combined screenshots, or your own way of observations. So this picture I wanted to focus on. I found it on the wall of one of the community-based preschools, non-for-profit center, where they explored one of my favorite books by Eric Carle. So it's about Move Like a Monkey. Yes, so it's a really great exploration of movement. What made it meaningful is that it had pictures. I didn't put pictures in here because they had pictures of real children doing the giraffe posture, pretending to be a monkey, and other things from the book. Then it had samples of their mark making or drawing. So this one is a giraffe. You can see beautiful colors and interpretation of the game and the book. How amazing. So this could be a sample of child's learning, but also could give us some ideas on what to capture in learning notes. All right. So that's pretty much it. Make sure that you are objective. Make sure that you use learning notes in a consistent way, because each educator might have different interpretation of what is significant to observe. They definitely will have different observations. That's okay. So just provide I guess some guidelines if you are an educational leader yourself to your colleagues. If you are a room leader, tell your other staff members on what to do for consistency. All in all, to summarize, I think along with anecdotal records, jottings, learning notes, provide quite a simple yet powerful way to assess and support children's learning. Educators can capture important moments quickly, and they can use this tool efficiently. I love this tool. What do you think? Will you use learning notes next time you observe children? And if you want to read more, here is a reference to the original source, Assessment of Young Children Language in New Zealand. Also, I am showing you the link to Ken research page, and you can read all his articles through Google Scholar or ResearchGate. Yeah, so lots and lots of articles, but you can check this one, a critique to use learning stories, assess learning dispositions of young children. Highly recommend you to read it. Now, a bit of personal promotion. So as you know, I have a PayHip store, and I have few really good relevant products for you if you are interested in writing good observations. How to write anecdotal observations with lots of examples from my practice and other people's practice. E-wildlife outcomes and sub-outcomes with links to series will help you with interpret part of learning notes. Jean Piaget's theory can help you with interpret part of notes. Essential Guide to Writing Learning Observations is just a guide that can help you to get started. If you don't have textbooks by Karen Cairns are usually great. Programming and Planning by Arthur and colleagues are also fabulous books to start with observations. And one of my favorite one that I discovered last year, Documenting Children's Learning by Kaylee Goodseer and Anne Horton. So also learning observations, keywords and phrases. This is an amazing resource that is free. Please download it and start using the words for description part. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it useful, please share it with your colleagues and friends, and subscribe if you like this video. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.